Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Leslie McWhirter. I'm the MapViewer Product Manager, and I'm here today to go over geocoding in MapViewer 8. I'll be answering the following questions. What is geocoding, and how does my data need to be set up in order to geocode? How can I geocode my addresses? And then how can I plot these addresses as point locations on my map? After I answer each of these questions, I'll be stopping for a few minutes to answer any questions you might have. You can send your questions to me via the chat function. At the very top of your screen, you should see a green tab that says Viewing Leslie McWhirter's Application. Click on that tab and click the chat button. This webinar will also be recorded, so after the webinar is finished, the video will be available on our website at www.goldensoftware.com. Click on the MapViewer 8 homepage and then go to the Training Videos tab and click Webinar. So let's begin. What is geocoding? According to Google developers, geocoding is the process of converting addresses into geographic coordinates which you can then use to place markers on a map or position the map. This is most useful because most mapping programs cannot place markers at address locations. They need real-world XY coordinates. While there are various free geocoders available online, such as Google Maps, that work well for one-time lookups for the general public, these often do not meet the needs of businesses that need to look up hundreds or thousands of addresses for locating customers or optimizing routes. MapViewer's geocoding feature takes addresses in a data file, finds associated lat-long values for those addresses, and writes those lat-long values to user-defined columns in the data file for use in placing markers at those locations. So this leads into my next question. How does the data need to be formatted in order to perform geocoding? A proper address contains the street address, city, state, and zip code. This can either be all in one column with those entries separated by commas, or they can each be in separate columns. For the state, either the full name or the two-letter abbreviation is accepted. And for streets, for the street address itself, various street names such as circle versus CIR and street versus ST are accepted, as well as cardinal directions. You can use the abbreviations E, W, S, and N. And these are not case sensitive. So are there any questions so far about what geocoding is or how to set up your data in order to geocode it? It looks like somebody's asking, can you change an address to UTM coordinates? MapViewer and most other geocoding services that I'm familiar with convert addresses into lat-long coordinates only. If you want to convert your coordinates into UTM, after getting the latitude and longitude coordinates from the geocoding process, you can click on the Home Data Reproject Data File command to convert those lat-long values into UTM coordinates. Okay, so it looks like somebody has a question about the formatting. So they're wondering, if you have multiple columns, does this address, city, state, and zip code each have to have a separate column, or can you have, say, city and state separated by a comma in one column? If you are using multiple columns, you do have to have one column for each of those four entries, and you cannot mix one column addresses with multi-column addresses in the same file. If you do have both in one file, I recommend sorting based on the next empty column for those one column addresses. So say the water park name is our first column and the address is our second column. We would sort based on column C so that all of the multi-column addresses are together and all of the single column addresses are together. And then we could copy and paste into a new data file to geocode those two separately. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and close these files out, and let's actually move on to how can we geocode. So I'm going to use one of those data files that I just showed you, but first we're going to need to download some STR files. So I'm going to minimize MapViewer and go to our website, www.goldensoftware.com. Under Support, I'm going to click on Support Central, and this will take us to our Support Central tab. And then if I scroll down in the Downloads section under Boundaries, there's STR Street Files. These STR files are what MapViewer uses to convert addresses into lat-long coordinates. So we'll need to download the correct STR files before we can perform the geocoding. If you're doing addresses in the entire United States, you can just download the strstreetfiles.zip, and that will contain all of the STR files. Alternatively, you can expand a certain state and either download a zip file for all STRs in that state, or you can download specific STR files individually. I've already downloaded the co.zip file and unzipped it, so we can go ahead and go back to MapViewer now in order to perform the geocoding. So we'll go to the Analysis tab, and in the Geocoding section, we'll click Geocode. Now we're prompted with a dialog that says geocoding requires a data file containing addresses or intersecting streets to be loaded into the active layer. Would you like to load a data file now onto layer number 1? We're prompted with this because we have no data yet. So we're going to click Yes, and we're going to select our multi-column worksheet and click Open. And alternatively, if we already had that file open, we could use Loaded Worksheet and select it from this drop-down list. We'll click Open, and then we'll get to the main geocoding dialog, the Assign Latitude Longitude Coordinates to US address or street intersection. So the very first thing we'll need to set is the geocoding data source. Because we downloaded those STR files from Golden Software's website, we're going to make sure this is set to census-based Golden Software STR street data. Then we need to specify where these STR files are located. So I'll click the Open File icon there, and then I will navigate to my desktop where I've saved this. I'm going to select that CO folder and click Open. So now there are a couple of options in this Input Columns of the Active Layers worksheet. So very first thing we'll do is set the address column. This is going to be the street address. Alternatively, it would be the only column containing addresses if we were just using a single data column. We do have our city, state, and zip codes in separate columns, so we'll check that checkbox. And then we'll define which columns our city, state, and zip code are located in the data file. In the Output Columns of the Active Layers worksheet section, the latitude and longitude are automatically set to the first 2 empty columns in the worksheet. So I'm going to go ahead and leave those as is. There is a results string for each of the addresses in our file. And this, what the results string is, it just tells us whether or not the address was found exactly and there's an exact match, whether it is an approximated match, or whether a zip code centroid is used instead of an exact match for the address. So I'm going to go ahead and write that out so that we can use that information later. So there are 4 more checkboxes and 1 button in this dialog. There's first row as label, which we did have a header column, or a header row in our data, so we'll go ahead and leave that checked. There's display interactive geocoding dialog when necessary. I always recommend checking this box, because if a match isn't able to be found automatically, it'll prompt you with the addresses it couldn't find, and it'll allow you to do manual selections if you can find an appropriate match. Then there's use closest match if exact match can't be found. What this does is if the exact street number isn't found, it assigns the lat long of the closest available street number. So that's where those approximations come into play. And then the last checkbox here is assign zip centroid to records with wrong address format or no geocoding data file if possible. So if you have an address in a county whose STR file you don't have, or if the address is in a wrong format or something and can't be found, it will assign the latitude and longitude of the zip code centroid for that address. This isn't extremely useful if all of your addresses are in a single county, for example, but since ours aren't, we'll go ahead and leave that checked. So now the last, the button here, there's an abbreviation editor button at the bottom. If you click that, you can see this is where it's defined what abbreviations are acceptable. So this is where you can see in the substitution column, there are specific things that MapViewer uses for each street type and cardinal direction. So for avenue, the internal usage is AV, but it will accept AVE or avenue spelled out because it just does this substitution internally. You can change any of these by double-clicking in the cell, and alternatively, you can add new ones if your specified usage is not listed by pressing the Control key and clicking. This will add a new field. In the middle column here, it lists matching strings to be removed. So if it finds a number sign or a period anywhere in your address, it'll remove it. And the same type of thing goes for this right-hand pane. These are strings that will be removed, and everything after it will be truncated. So if apartment or floor or PO box is listed anywhere in your address, that word and anything following it will be removed because that isn't useful for MapViewer in determining the lat long coordinates of that address. So these are appropriate for our use. So I'm going to go ahead and click Cancel to get out of that dialog. And I'm going to click OK to begin the geocoding process. Okay, so here's that interactive geocoding dialog that I was referring to. There are two records that weren't able to be geocoded automatically. The first doesn't have any sort of error string. The second has a street not found error. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do that one first. I'll click on that address, and then I'm going to search in the list for Bromley Lane. This is in our B's here. And I don't automatically see one, so I'm going to check this checkbox that says Include Streets from Vicinities. And what that does is it includes streets that say don't have a city listed or are in neighboring cities to the city that I've chosen. So if I scroll down now, I do see there's a Bromley Lane. So I'll select that and click Geocode Selected Record with Updated Street. And it removes it from that list on the left. So now there's just Spader Way, which was unable to be found. So we'll select that one. Include Streets from Vicinities is still checked. So we'll go ahead and scroll down and see if we can't find Spader Way. Okay, so I don't actually see a Spader Way. What this might mean is that either that address is incorrect in some way, maybe Spader Way is misspelled and there is no Spader Way, or it might be that this address is newer than the STR files that we're using to geocode this file. So I'm going to go ahead and click Geocode above records and assign zip code centroid of no match. So that address will get the zip code centroid assigned to it. And then what we see here is a geocoding report, which tells us that of all of our records, 7 of them are exact matches, 2 were approximated, and 1 was assigned the zip code centroid. That was that last one that we chose to do that with. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here and see, are there any questions about geocoding, the process of geocoding? Okay, so someone is asking what's actually in an STR file. That's a great question. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new MapViewer window, and we can go ahead and take a look at one of these files by creating a base map from it. So I'll just select the first STR file there in the list, and then we're going to get a pop-up here that gives us options. We can choose to load a portion of the county by towns or zip codes, or the entire county, and then we can choose which county we'd like to load. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Denver County. The attributes and PIDs are fine with me, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then when it loads, you'll see that that this is just a very detailed street map of this county. And all of these STR files are the same way. So that's how MapViewer is able to turn an address into a specific latitude, longitude location. So someone else is asking, some of the addresses weren't found. Yep, there were 2 that weren't found. How can you update the STR files if they're not finding your data? STR files are actually a proprietary Golden software file format that can't be edited, but as I briefly mentioned earlier, there are other file formats you can use in your geocoding process instead of these STR files. GDT, TeleAtlas, SHP, or TS1 files are available to use, so if you can find or create one of those file formats to use in your geocoding, you would use it in the same way that we use these STR files. But I can certainly add your vote to our suggestion file for the ability to edit our STR files. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions, so we'll go ahead and move on again. So we'll go back to our primary window here, and then we'll go over the last question: how can I plot these results? So if you notice here at the bottom of our geocoding report, it says, would you like to open pin map dialog? If you click yes, a pin map will automatically be created from the results of the geocoding. If you click no, you can still create a pin map by going to Map, Create Map, and then clicking on Pin. If you want to edit the data, all you have to do then is click Home, Data, View, and that'll open up your modified data file. So you'll see we have a latitude column, a longitude column, and that result string that I was mentioning. So say you can see the one that the zip code is used for is this Bay Aquatic Park. If you wanted to update those latitude and longitude coordinates, you could easily do so using one of those free online geocoders. So what I'll do right now is I'll go ahead and minimize MapViewer, and I'll go to Google Maps and just type in Bay Aquatic Park in Broomfield, Colorado. So if I right-click on this pin and click What's Here, it'll tell me the latitude and longitude coordinates up in the top left corner. So I can just copy and paste those straight into MapViewer, and it'll automatically update my pin map. So let me grab the other coordinate. And I'll go ahead and make a note in the results string that I used Google Maps for that address. Oops. So as you can see, it was very easy to create this pin map. If you wanted to save out your results, you could easily use the file save command to save this worksheet out for use in another program. Or alternatively, you can just save this GSM MapViewer file, because the MapViewer 8 GSM file format embeds the data, so you don't have to worry about saving that data separately. Again, so it's as simple as that to turn a whole bunch of addresses into meaningful lat-long locations for plotting in MapViewer or other programs. Are there any questions about plotting a pin map from geocoding results or about geocoding in general? Okay, so someone is asking, is there a way to make pins different to show the approximated versus the exact results? Absolutely. So if you'll remember back, I mentioned that we're going to save this result string, and it's for something exactly like this. So if we click on our pin map layer in the Object Manager, and we go to the Map tab in the Property Manager, we can set our method to class by text, and then we can set our data column to that result string. And so what that's done is for every unique result string, it's chosen a different color for our symbols. It's chosen red for that Google map, yellow for the approximations, and green for the exact matches. And I can go ahead and click Edit in this Classes section to specify what symbols are being used for those. Okay, let's see. Someone else is asking, okay, so when someone tried to create this pin map, they mentioned they're getting a GSDraw error. So that's something that's cropped up within the last few days. That's because of a Windows update that happened. It introduced a bug, and that bug is affecting all of our programs that can draw symbols. All that you have to do is remove that specific update that happened, and we have directions to do so on our website, and that will fix the change until Microsoft reverts, or until Microsoft fixes that bug, and we're also working on a permanent fix in case they don't do so in a timely fashion. Are there any more questions? All right, we'll go ahead and wrap things up then. If you do think of any more questions, we're here to help. You can contact me directly at Leslie, that's Leslie, at goldensoftware.com, or MapViewer support at goldensoftware.com. Thank you for your time. Have a nice day.